ಯಾವುದು? Maybe 257.
Where? 57?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so 57. Second chapter, 57. Yeah, so we're discussing the qualities of a person who's in transcendental consciousness. This is a question Arjuna asked. What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? So the first point was that Prajahati Yadikamam Sarvam Parthamanogitan Atmani Vadmanatustastitu Pragyasya Shita Pragyasta Dodshite. First point is that when a person gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, when his mind thus purified finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. So that's first point in point 55, verse 55. And then second point, Dukeson Vigna Manaksu Kesu Viktas Vitaragabaya Kodu Stadir Uchete. Second point is one who's not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. So now today, we're going to study the third qualification. Yes, sarvachana pisnehas.
Sarvatra visnehas.
Tatat prapya subha subham.
Tatapya shubhashubham.
Nabhinandati na dvesti.
Nabhinandati na dvesti.
Tasya pragya pratisthita.
Tasya pragya pratisthita.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One who. Sarvatra. Everywhere. Anabhisneha. Without affection. Tat. That. Prapya. Achieving. Shubha. Good. Ashubham. Evil. Na. Never. Abhinandati. Praises. Na. Never. Dvesti. Envies. Sasya. His. Pragya. Perfect knowledge. Pratisthita. Fixed. Translation. In the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Okay. Agastya can read.
There is always some upheaval in the material world which may be good or evil. One who is not agitated by such material upheavals, who is unaffected by good and evil, is to be understood to be fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one is in the material world, There is always the possibility of good and evil because this world is full of duality. But one who is fixed in Krishna consciousness is not affected by good and evil because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good absolute. Such consciousness in Krishna situates one in a perfect transcendental position called technically samadhi.
Great. Yeah, the key phrase here, because he is simply concerned with Krishna, who is all good, absolute. Such consciousness in Krishna situates one in a perfect transcendental position called technically samadhi. Well, that's not so easy for a beginner, because when you begin in Krishna consciousness, you get affected by everything. Therefore, the ability to be concerned always with Krishna develops from kirtana. This chanting Hare Krishna is of prime importance. If we develop a taste for chanting, then smarana, or remembering Krishna always, will happen. So, there's always been this little bit of discussion amongst Vaishnavas. What's the most important thing? It's remembering Krishna. But the Goswamis and Lord Chaitanya, they emphasize chanting Hare Krishna as the most important thing. Why? Especially for beginners. Because remembering always Krishna can only happen by the power of kirtana. See, when one is exclusively devoted and unconscious of the environment, then one can go on with this remembering without any interruption. But that's not possible for beginners in Krishna consciousness. So Jiva Goswami has said that all other forms of sadhana must be subservient to kirtan. This is Lord Chaitanya's preaching. Because in Kali Yuga, kirtana has its own characteristic. Kirtana meaning chanting Hare Krishna, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So, the sahajas, or false devotees, they emphasize smarana, remembering. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not accept that. Yeah, in other words, therefore they recommend a secluded life, and in their mind they go on remembering, or meditating, let's say. So, this is something we should learn. It's the importance of chanting Hare Krishna. The number one emphasis. Everything comes from that. Everything in the life of a Vaishnava, especially in this age, comes from chanting. So unless we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra attentively, at minimum 16 rounds a day, we don't get to the point where we will not get to the point where we're not affected by things that happen. And things are happening all the time. So here it says, in the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. Well, most people say, how is this possible? I'm affected every day. I read the news. There's problems at work, there's problems at home, this thing, that thing, you know. And the previous verse said, one who is not disturbed in mind even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. Wow. Attachment, fear, and anger. Everybody's attached, and everyone is feeling fear, and people get angry all the time. You get angry? So, how are you going to get to that point? It's by chanting Hare Krishna attentively, and with faith that Krishna is non-different than his name. If we don't do that, then everything just is mental. It's not real. We can theoretically, read these things and even explain them, but that doesn't mean we are unattached. So there's a big difference between theoretical understanding and practical understanding. So we have to have the practical experience of regularly chanting minimum 16 rounds a day. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Hare. And the only way you can do that is to wake up early. If we don't get regulated to wake up early and chant our rounds, then it's very hard. I mean, it's like a struggle, because as soon as 7 o'clock comes, we have to do so many things. 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, there's 100 things we have to do, and then the whole world wakes up at that. They're all up and running already. So if we wake up late every day, we'll never be able to chant properly 16 rounds. Somehow or other, we have to organize ourselves to wake up early and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Okay, so any more questions about that verse? So we're learning about the qualities of a transcendental person. Okay, so the next verse. Well, actually, there's another verse where it talks about this vitiraga by krodha, freedom from attachment, fear, and anger. So let's look at the 4th chapter, and verse number 10. 4th chapter, verse 10.
What pen is that? Read the problem.
Go ahead.
Okay. As described, meaning first,
Just read the verse in English.
okay. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me. Many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. Purport. As described above, it is very difficult for a person who is too materially affected to understand the personal nature of the Supreme Personality of Truth, Supreme Absolute Truth. Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person.
Okay, now see, that's extremely important. One who's Generally, people who are attached to the bodily conception of life are so absorbed in materialism that it is almost impossible for them to understand how the Supreme can be a person. So, this bodily conception of life, I am this body, and everything in relation to this body is mine, and so forth. Okay, go ahead.
Such materialists cannot even imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal, and because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer a kind of merging into the impersonal world. Generally, they compare the living entities to the bubbles of the ocean, which merge into the ocean. That is the highest perfection of spiritual existence, attainable without individual personality. This is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence.
So this means that the impersonalists because they have such disgust for life in the material world, they cannot imagine keeping their individuality eternally. And because, we suffer the threefold miseries, we get old, we get sick, and we approach death. They just can't imagine that there's a perfect state of individuality in the spiritual world where there's no birth, no old age, no disease and death. So when they hear, oh, you can live eternally, they say, no, I don't want to live eternally, because they think I'm going to go on like this eternally, suffering. So therefore, they become attached to the impersonal concept that you exist without a body and without a individuality. You sort of merge, like the bubbles of air sort of merge into the ocean. And therefore you have nothing to worry about. There are no problems. There's no interactions. And they imagine that that's some peaceful situation. So, such materialists cannot imagine that there is a transcendental body which is imperishable, full of knowledge, and eternally blissful. In the materialistic concept, the body is perishable, full of ignorance, and completely miserable. Therefore, people in general keep this same bodily idea in mind when they are informed of the personal form of the Lord. For such materialistic men, the form of the gigantic material manifestation is supreme. Consequently, they consider the Supreme to be impersonal. And because they are too materially absorbed, the conception of retaining the personality after liberation from matter frightens them. When they are informed that spiritual life is also individual and personal, they become afraid of becoming persons again, and so they naturally prefer the kind of merging into the impersonal void. So this is and he says that this is a kind of fearful stage of life, devoid of perfect knowledge of spiritual existence. But
furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all. Being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that is everything
That and that.
and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some
Yes. So everything is void. So now it's talking about Buddhists. It's another type of Mayavadi. And again, Buddha saw, he explained life as suffering. So if you have a body eternally and individuality eternally, then they see that as being continual suffering. So then they want to merge into a void where there's no interaction. So the Mayavadi, there's different types of Mayavadis. So one is like the Buddhists, and the other is like the ones that want to merge into Brahman. Okay. And if you read philosophy, then you get confused. There's so many different ideas in philosophy. When I say philosophy, I mean you study Western philosophy, you get confused. Anybody have a cell phone here?
Yeah.
Okay, look up the word solipsism. SOLIPTISM. SOLIP.
Okay, so I'm gonna read it out.
Yeah, read it out.
So it's a noun, meaning the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist. Again, the view or theory that the self is all that can be known to exist.
That's it.
And yeah, there is some more Wikipedia.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is from the Wikipedia. Solipsism, meaning alone, solus meaning alone, ipsi meaning self, is a philosophical idea that only one's own mind is sure to exist. As an epistemological position, solipsism holds that knowledge of anything outside one's own mind is unsure. The external world and the other minds cannot be known and might not exist outside the mind. As a metaphysical position, solipsism goes further to the conclusion that the world and other minds do not exist. This extreme position is claimed to be irrefutable, as the solipsist believes themselves to be the only true authority, all other being creations of their own mind.
Now see, this is complete nonsense. This is what you study in a philosophy course. Things like that.
Is it frog in the well?
Huh?
Is it like the frog in the well thinks this is my world, this is it?
Something like that, yeah.
Or is it like yatama tatapat?
No. This is specific. It says that you're the only authority. You can't really determine if there's anybody else like you. Right. So that's solipsism. And then now look up positivism. Positivism. See, this is what you study in philosophy class. So after studying all this, you get more confused.
From the Wikipedia.
There's so many different concepts of what is reality. So solipsism is the only thing that's real is your own mind, and you're the authority. Go ahead.
Positivism. This is from the Wikipedia. Positivism is a philosophical theory stating that certain positive knowledge is based on natural phenomena and their properties and relations. Thus, the information derived from sensory experiences, interpreted through reason and logic, forms the exclusive source of all certain knowledge. Positivism holds that valid knowledge is found only in this knowledge,
Posteriori.
posteriori knowledge. Verified data, positive facts received from the senses are known as empirical evidence. Thus, positivism is based on empiricism.
Yeah, in other words, basically it's saying that only what you can verify with your senses is knowledge. Anything outside of that, they reject.
Based on your observation.
Your observation, yeah. So, obviously we have four defects, right? We make mistakes, we're easily illusion, the senses are imperfect, and we have a cheating propensity. So, their point is that only knowledge that you can verify with your senses is true, and that's anything outside of it, like Bhagavad Gita and spiritual world is Vaikuntha, all that is nonsense for them. Right? So here, one says, you are the authority. You're the only thing you know to be sure is your mind, and whatever you think about in your mind, that's the only truth in life. And then this says, whatever you can identify with your senses, that is real. And anything beyond that, whatever you can't verify with your senses, it's not real. So you read all this philosophy, you get more confused. And you're not really sure, what's real. Right? Okay, so when people hear all these things, just like here it says that, furthermore, there are many persons who cannot understand spiritual existence at all, being embarrassed by by many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculation. They become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Go ahead. Such people are in a diseased condition of life.
Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached and therefore do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything.
So some of them are Mayavadis that want to merge into the Brahman or merge into the void, and some of them are, go ahead.
Some of them disbelieve in everything.
Some of them don't believe in anything. They're just disgusted because there's too many contradictions. One philosopher says, another philosopher says that. They say, this is all nonsense. I don't want to hear anymore. Go ahead.
Being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness, this last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication, and their affective hallucination are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision.
So, we have, new religions coming up all the time. Especially in the 19th century, you had Seventh-day Adventists, you had Jehovah's Witnesses, you had Mormons, you had all these new religions came out of.
But they're all part of Christianity, right?
No, well,
No?
no, the Christians don't accept them.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they don't accept them.
Oh,
They claim they're part of Christianity,
oh,
but the Christians don't accept them. They're all deviants.
No, but ISKCON is accepted by Hindus.
But we're not talking about ISKCON. We're talking about Jehovah's Witnesses. We're talking about Seventh-day Adventists. We're talking about Mormons, and there's others. There are others also. So they, at a certain point, you get confused. Some people get confused. It's all nonsense. I don't want to hear anymore. You know, they get angry and confused. But some people, in their anger and confusion, they take to intoxication, and then sometimes they think they have what's called an epiphany. Epiphany means an awakening. Under the spell of intoxication, they think they see God or they see something, and they start a new religion. I mean, the Mormonism is a perfect example of this guy named Joseph Smith. He goes up on a mountain in New York City, in New York State, and he has some mystical experience where God communicates to him, and he writes his own Bible that's different than the Christian Bible.
Oh, we didn't know that. I thought they were regular Bibles.
No. It's completely different. Yeah, the Mormon Bible. See, if you read the Old Testament of the regular Bible, there's a story about 10 tribes of Israel that were lost in history. Well, Joseph Smith picks up on that and says, one of those 10 tribes went from the Middle East to South America and then mixed with the indigenous Indians of South America and then slowly came up to North America, to the United States. And then he realized all this on the mountain. Now, maybe he had a hallucination, or I don't know, maybe he was smoking marijuana or something. No, we don't know. But then he writes this Bible in telling the history of that one tribe of the Israelites that was lost, but came to South America and then mixed with the Indians and came to North America. And now, from that point on, they're bringing knowledge of from the Old Testament, right, of God, and now so he writes this different Bible. They call it a Bible, but it's completely different. But it's derived a little bit from the Old Testament. You see, you didn't even know that, right? You thought they were Christians.
Yeah, because a lot of people.
Well, they say they're Christians, but the Christians don't accept them to be Christians. You see, it's confusion. There's absolute confusion. And people, some people, when they, after a little while, they just get disgusted and say, I don't want to hear anything. And then Jehovah's Witnesses is different again. Completely different again. They interpret the regular Bible differently than the Catholics and the Protestants. That's why the Catholics and Protestants, they don't accept them as Christians. They think they're crazy people. Then you have the Seventh-day Adventists, who are actually nice people. They're vegetarians, and but they have another concept of the Bible. So once you find out about all these things, you say, "This is crazy." Some people just get angry. And then, but all the time there are new people coming up, either through drugs or they make they take a little bit from this religion, a little bit from that religion. Like, for example, Akbar. Akbar started a new religion. Did you know that? In India?
Dina Ilahi.
Yeah, Ilahi.
Oh, that's a religion. Oh, okay.
It never worked, no, it failed.
But it was a good idea. They wanted to unite the Muslims and the Hindus. It was a really good attempt. Don't put your finger in your mouth. So you know anything about the religion?
Sorry?
Do you know anything about that religion besides the name?
Yeah, Akbar wanted to unite, as you said, Prabhuji, so because he married a Hindu wife, Jodhabhai. So,
Akbar.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a lot of wives. You know, one of his wives was an Armenian girl, and her son became a famous Hindi poet.
Amir Khusro.
I'm not sure which one. I'll find out. I'll find out. He became a famous Hindi poet.
Yeah, Amir Khusro is one of the.
Yeah, Amir Khusro is not
I don't know if
Hindi.
that was. I'm not sure. You can find out. Yeah, he had many wives, and of course, Maharaj Man Singh was the commander of his army. Maharaj Man Singh, you know, he built the Radha
Is it-
Govinda temple. He put the money up and he built that temple. And that temple was 7 stories high. And later on, when Aurangzeb was the king, he was, you know, in the Red Fort, and one day he looked and he could see something shining really, you know, brightly in long distance. See, this temple was 7 stories high. It was a very high temple. And they had a huge pot of ghee on the top of the temple, and they would light it. And he saw it from Delhi. And he asked, he said, "What is that thing?" And they said, "It's this big Hindu temple that was built by, you know, your grandfather or something like that, you know." And he ordered them to go and tear it down. So they started tearing it down. They went down to the 3rd floor, and then something happened and scared the heck out of them.
Mhm.
And they ran away and never came back again. So that's why the temple is still there.
There were only 3 floors of there now.
There's only 3 floors. Did you know that? Interesting, isn't it? He could see it from Delhi, from the Red Fort. I mean, but
Where is this temple?
it's in Vrindavan. It's one of the Goswami's temples.
Radha Govinda.
Oh, I think we went there.
Very famous.
They are saying Dine Ilahi prohibits lust, sensuality, slander, and pride. And also, soul is encouraged to purify through yearning of God. Celibacy is respected, and slaughter of animals is forbidden.
That was a great religion. It was a great religion.
But only 18 people follow it.
Yeah, they didn't want to give up eating meat.
So him and his 17 wives.
No, there were some people following it. There were some people following it. It was a great religion, you know. It's a shame it didn't spread. No, but you see, this is happening all the time. There's new religions all the time coming up. Just like this guy in Brazil, John of God. You ever hear of him?
God?
No, John. His name is John of God. It's not, he made up some crazy name. That's his name, John of God. So he's a healer. He was a healer, and he had a huge following. Huge following. Even Oprah went to see him.
He's asking what's the healer or who's a healer.
Well, people would go. Let's say they have cancer, or let's say they had a cancer, a big tumor, right? So he would do a little operation on them, you know, make some little cut in their skin, and then say some prayers and things, and the cancer would go away. Now, we don't know if it's true or not, but that's what they said. He used to get, every week he'd get 10,000 people coming to see him. 10,000 different people from all over the world to get healed, and, you know. But recently he,
Died.
no, he didn't die. He's in jail now.
Worse than that.
Even worse.
He got caught by the Me Too hashtag.
What's the Me Too?
No, he was doing nonsense to women, and no one said anything for years. But then they started talking about it, and now he's in jail. Well, he's in jail waiting for his trial, and it's completely ruined the economy of that little town in which he had It has this whole program. The whole economy of that town was from tourists that would come to see him.
Prabhu, somewhere that Rajendra called Prabhu, he sent me a
Who?
Rajendra, that Sanskrit, who was trying to teach Sanskrit
The
here.
Mayavadi.
And he sent me some link, and that link opened up a petition that Nityanand is Lord Shiva's avatar.
No, he's a big scoundrel.
Of course, we know that. We know he's a scoundrel.
He met, like the first time he met me, he said it's just time, like 6 months, like whole US is going to become Hindu.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
That is how he started his.
Because of Satguru.
Actually,
No,
I don't know,
because of
whatever.
Nityanand.
Then I
Oh,
said,
Nityananda. I'm mixed up because he always talks to me about Satguru. He never talked to.
No, he's starting now Nityanand, I think.
Now he's on Nityananda. No, the reason he's on Nityananda is because Nityananda supposedly teaches you how to become Superman.
Yeah, and he was actually in jail also, and then I don't know, still people follow him. And
He's not in jail now.
he's out.
Not now, he was one.
Yeah.
Wait, who is into that?
We can start a new religion. We can say, in our new religion, you can become Batman. Right? He's saying Superman, we say Batman.
The same thing is happening with Sadhguru Guru. Can you believe they are sending emails and giving out flyers
In Microsoft?
everywhere, especially near groceries. That's where people come more often, isn't it?
Like in Mayuri.
Mayuri.
Apnavasar.
And these are like, they see people,
Yeah.
men and women both, they are handing over, and then they are saying that it has changed their life, and they are saying just for $300. And these courses, he's coming in March to Seattle.
No,
And
they all start coming now. Yeah, Amma is going to come, Sadhguru will come, Kripa Mai will come, this one will come, that one, they all come.
$300, bro.
And each one is an incarnation of God.
And right in front, right, I had to bring one person from Bellevue, and because I was introduced him to me by another devotee. I don't. He's a good person, but he didn't know that this person. And all through the drive, he was talking about the greatness of Sadhguru, and he's talking 24 hours about him, and then he's saying, I'm doing this yoga, and I'm actually getting more power to see what you guys cannot see. Literally, he's saying
Yeah,
that, and then
He can't see that he's become an idiot. But we can see it.
There was a video where a girl was tied with the thing, and then she was able to see because Nityanand trained. I showed it to Sanskriti. Sanskriti said, whosoever it is, it's bogus.
So basically, $300, and he's coming in March, and it's all booked.
Yeah.
All booked.
$300.
$300 is the lowest ticket. It's like you're standing, and then and apparently what they're going to show is a technique, just like Sri Ravi Shankar, the Sudarshan yoga or whatever he calls that. And he says, if you do my yoga, I don't know what he's calling it as, but another 20 minutes of that every day, it's going to make you Batman or
You're going to be Superman.
yeah.
Prabhu, one of my friends in
We're going to start Batman.
Prabhu, one of my friends in New Jersey, around 2008 or 9, I think, when Nityanand case came out, they were devastated. They were following him like anything. Then I asked them to follow his son. Now both of them were double initiated, Sadhana Prabhu. They were like really devastated for full 1 year.
Okay, so you see what it says here, that being embarrassed by so many theories and by contradictions of various types of philosophical speculations, they become disgusted or angry and foolishly conclude that there is no supreme cause and that everything is ultimately void. Such people are in a diseased condition of life. Some people are too materially attached, and therefore they do not give attention to spiritual life. Some of them want to merge into the supreme spiritual cause, and some of them disbelieve in everything, being angry at all sorts of spiritual speculation out of hopelessness. This last class of men take to the shelter of some kind of intoxication. and their effective hallucinations are sometimes accepted as spiritual vision. One has to get rid of all three stages of attachment to the material world, negligence of spiritual life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these three stages of the material concept of life, one has to take shelter of the Lord, guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the discipline and regulative principles of devotional life. That last stage of devotional life is called bhava, or transcendental love of Godhead. Okay, go ahead. Continue reading.
According to Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, the science of devotional service.
You don't have to read the Sanskrit, just...
In the beginning, one must have a preliminary desire for self-realization. This will bring one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. In the next stage, one becomes initiated by an elevated spiritual master, and under his instruction, the neophyte devotee begins the process of devotional service. By execution of devotional service, under the guidance of the spiritual master, one becomes free from all material attachment and attains steadiness in self-realization, and acquires a taste for hearing about the absolute personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. This taste leads one further forward to attachment for Krishna consciousness, which is matured in bhava, or the preliminary stage of transcendental love of God. Real love for God is called prema, the highest perfectional stage of life. In the prema stage, there is constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. So by the slow process of devotional service, under the guidance of the bona fide spiritual master, one can attain the highest stage, being freed from all material attachment, from the fearful of one's individual spiritual personality, and from the frustration that result in void philosophy. Then one can ultimately attain to the abode of the Supreme Lord.
So this is the process of Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada says, it says here, well, yeah, Prabhupada says that this is a slow process. In other words, first you develop a little bit of faith, or first you have a preliminary desire for self-realization. You want to understand who you are. And this brings one to the stage of trying to associate with persons who are spiritually elevated. So in the beginning there's Shraddha, Adho Shraddha. So Shraddha means you see devotees chanting in the streets, they give out prasadam, and you say, wow, this is nice, you know, they're happy, they look happy, they're chanting, they're giving out, they're generous. Well, maybe I'd like to find out more about this. So then you begin to associate with devotees, right? Because you liked that preliminary contact that you had. You know, that's why devotees have to be very kind and giving, and not be too aggressive. Like one time, there was this one girl girl devotee from Vancouver. She was very aggressive on Sankirtan with people. So I remember one time after talking to this one boy, I was listening to what she was saying, you know, and she kept pushing him to buy the book. And when he refused to buy the book, she just turned her back on him, ignored him, and went to somebody else. And I saw that, and I talked to her afterwards, and I said, I don't know if that was the right thing to do, because, and he wanted to continue talking to her. She just turned it when he said he didn't want to buy the book. She just turned her back on him, and then went to somebody else. So that leaves the impression in a person's mind that this person is only trying to sell a book to me, not really interested in trying to, talk to me. Right? So we have to be very careful when we're trying to represent Krishna consciousness. And people notice these things if a person is too aggressive. Like the Jehovah's Witnesses were so aggressive that people complained to the government, and the case went up to the Supreme Court in the United States. And the Supreme Court of the United States made a decision, it's in the 1920s, that Jehovah's Witnesses have a right to distribute their literature. They have this magazine called Watchtower. But they're not allowed to walk up to a person and talk to them. They can just stand on a corner and hold the magazine in their hand, and if someone comes to them, then they can speak to them. But they're not allowed to go up to people. Have you ever seen Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yeah. There are a lot of places in Seattle.
All right.
Near Macy's and
Right.
they have a stand
Right.
where
Do they
there's
come
a book.
and
No,
try and
no,
talk?
they do not.
No,
They
they're
just
not
sit
allowed to
around.
by the law.
Yeah.
For
Is it-
them it is allowed, Prabhu, or for everyone?
No, it's only for them. Because they were so aggressive in the 1920s, bothering people, pestering them. And someone made a complaint, and it was a legal case, and it went up to the Supreme Court in the United States. And the Supreme Court told them, you're not allowed to aggressively sell your magazines. We can't stop you, because there's freedom of speech. But if you go up to people and accost them, we'll put you in jail. Because they were so obnoxious. And they're just getting everybody upset. So there's a special law. That's why, you just see them holding their magazine like this, right?
Yeah.
Right? And if someone goes up to them, then they can talk to them. You have to understand the history of this country, Do you ever try and figure out why they were just standing there?
No, I wanted to, but again, I just take a walk after I
Yeah.
take a lunch, and then I appreciate their patience. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
They're all day there, standing, and so right in front of Macy's they are.
Yeah.
But
There
I
are two
also see a lot
entrances.
of women chanting in the Redmond area. They'll be chanting and they'll be holding some boards like, about abortion or something about Jesus Christ, but they'll be only chanting, they don't do anything.
What do they chant?
I don't know, on the rosary they keep doing something.
On the rosary.
Yeah, they will do something.
This is an amazing country, it's freedom of religion. So there's so many religions, you get confused. You ever ask them what they're doing? No. They ever hand you something?
No, they just had a poster about, about
Abortion.
and things like that, but they were praying and there were about 3 of them standing.
Yeah.
So I really don't know what it is.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so this is the process of devotional service. And it all begins by having a preliminary desire for self-realization. And just like if you're walking down the street and for months you've been thinking in your mind, what is the purpose of life? And, is there a God? And you see some person on the street, praying and has a sign, Jesus loves you, and so forth. So, and you say, oh, maybe I should ask that person, because I have all these doubts. And you go up to them and start talking to them. And if they're not a crazy fanatic, you might get attracted, and they'll invite you, please come to our church, and, be a member of our church, and you'll find out the answers to all your questions. All the answers are in the Bible. So that happens all the time. It happens to us also. People come up, I have all these questions, no one's ever been able to answer them. What is this, what is that, and if someone's an experienced devotee, they begin talking to them, and then they end up joining DY,
Yes.
DYS.
Discover
Discover
yourself.
yourself, yeah. Yeah. Because people are thinking about these things all the time, But some people, they're too shy to go up to someone because they're not sure if that person is crazy or they're actually for real, Like, for example, there's this black group. They're called the Black Israelites. And you'll see them downtown Nordstrom's.
Nostrums, yeah.
Yeah, they're always in Nordstrom's in front, right? And they have a microphone, and they say, that God is black, and white people are all evil, and they're all going to hell, and they're just talking all day long, saying the same thing, right? They're called Black Israelites, So they claim that Jesus was black, and all these things, right? So, and they make devotees. Not a lot, but they won't accept any white people. Never see any white people with them. They're all black. Now this is right here in Seattle, right? And by the way, they're all over the country. They're all over the country. That thing happened with these Catholic students from Covington, Kentucky, I think. They went to Washington, D.C. And there were a bunch of boys and girls, and they had the mega hat on. Make America Great Again. The baseball hats. And they went for, they were against abortion. Their whole group went. The high school kids from a Catholic high school. And then these black guys from the Black Israelites, they started insulting them, And the kids didn't know what to do. They were all polite and they were all decent kids, so they didn't want to get into an argument with them. And then this group of American Indians came. They were playing drums and they're going hoo hoo ha ha hoo hoo ha, like that. And they thought that those kids were making fun of the black people, which they were not.
Mm-hmm.
They were not. They were just standing there smiling. The black guys were insulting them, and they were just smiling. They didn't react. So then the Indians come up, and this one guy is playing the drum, going hoo hoo hoo, like that, and this one boy is just standing there looking at him and smiling. And this went viral all over the United States. The newspapers and the news took pictures of the kids smiling, and the Indian guy comes right up to his face, and he's going like that, banging on his drum, right? And the kid just stood there and the other kids was just standing there smiling, but they didn't insult the Indian guy or nothing. The Indian guy thought that these kids were insulting the black guys. So it's a comedy of errors, right? So all over the United States, on the news, in the newspapers, they said that these Trump supporters were insulting the Indians, and that means the American Indians, right? Turns out the guy that was playing the drum in the face of the kid, he's a convicted felon.
What's a convicted?
A felon means someone who broke the law, and he has a police record, right? And then people went on internet, it went crazy for like a week, blaming these kids, and then they got death threats. They were afraid to go to school. The school closed down because there were death threats. But then they began to come back and explain what really happened. And then after 2 weeks, people realized the whole thing was a hoax. These kids didn't do anything. They were respectful. They were just smiling. And the other people were taunting them, especially the Indian guy who went right up to the kid's face, banging on his drum, like that. So you see the level of ignorance in this country is reaching a hysterical point now, right? And then misinformation is becoming the general rule, and it's causing a lot of havoc in the country. Okay, so, but this is the real process of devotional service. Adho Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangata Bhajana Kriya. So Shraddha means incipient or beginning faith and attraction to this spiritual life and a desire for self-realization. Then Sadhu Sangha, you begin to associate with devotees. And then devotees convince you of the importance of reading Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and above all, accepting a bona fide spiritual master. And then eventually you get initiated, and under the guidance of Shiksha and Diksha gurus, you get rid of all your bad habits. Sleeping in till 10, 12 o'clock in the morning, eating this, eating that, etc., all those bad habits. And you become regulated in spiritual life. And then after that, one develops strong faith that I'm going to do this the rest of my life. That's nishta, strong faith. I think that's a Hindi word also, isn't it? Nishta means faith.
Yes.
Yeah. So anartha nivriti means getting rid of all your bad habits under the guidance of Shiksha and Diksha gurus. And then one develops strong faith, and then there is ruchi, a real taste for hearing every day Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, real taste for it. Right? Just like in the beginning, someone says, hey, it's really cool smoking cigarettes. So you try it, and you puff it, and you inhale the smoke, and then you start coughing, and your eyes get red, and you feel like you're going to faint, but you keep trying to smoke, and then pretty soon you can take a big puff and inhale it, and you look like a dragon, when all the smoke comes out of your mouth. And now you're hooked on cigarettes for the rest of your life. Yes?
One day in my office, he smokes, and he was saying that he regrets the first time he smoked. I tried.
Why doesn't he regret every time he smokes? That's another nonsense statement. He regrets the first time he smokes. Why doesn't he regret it now?
No, he's saying he can't get rid of it now.
No, that's just a poor excuse. Yeah. So, but see, first time you smoke, you'll cough. You have tears in your eyes. Your face gets red. You feel like you're choking. But then you keep smoking, and pretty soon you can inhale. You look like this. You see that thing there? This big plume of smoke comes out of your mouth. And then when you get really hooked on it, as soon as your cigarette is almost burning your lips, you get a new cigarette. You put it in your mouth, and you use that little butt of the cigarette that still has a fire on it, and you light the next cigarette. In other words, you don't take a break from one cigarette to another.
Chain smoker.
You're a chain smoker. So and then your fingers get yellow here, these two fingers, because of the smoke and the nicotine. And then you're hooked. You're smoking 2, 3, 4 packs of cigarettes a day. Spending like $25, $30 a day on cigarettes.
Cigarette is so costly.
Oh yeah, now it's very costly. It's called a sin tax. Yes, it's a sin tax. In other words, anything that's sinful, like liquor, cigarettes, and other things, they put more tax on it. So the government, see, instead of outlawing it, the government doesn't outlaw it, even though they know it's bad. They force you to pay more money for it. So they make money off of your, self-destruction. If it's so bad, why don't they outlaw it? Right?
But would you like syntax and also like syntax?
No, that's S-Y-N. This is S-I-N. Syntax is, grammar in English, but this is S-I-N-T-A-X, syntax. Okay, so now let's look at 5th chapter, 23rd verse. So we're talking about vitaraga bhaya krodha, becoming free from attachment, anger, and fear. Okay? So what does this say?
523, Prabhu.
523. Who's going to read?
You can read it.
Okay. Nada. Ria, you want to read 523? Yeah, good.
Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is well situated and is happy in this world. If one wants to make steady progress on the path of self-realization, he must try to control the forces of the material senses. There are the forces of talk, forces of anger, forces of mind, forces of the stomach, forces of the
Genitals?
and forces of the tongue. One who is able to control the forces of all these different senses and the mind is called Goswami, or one. Such Goswamis live strictly controlled lives and forego altogether the forces of the senses. Material desires, when
Unsatiated.
generate anger, and thus the mind, eye, and chest become agitated. Therefore, one must practice to control them before one gives up this material life. If one who can do this is understood to be self-realized and is thus happy in the state of self-realization, it is the duty of the transcendentalist to try
Strenuously. Very hard.
to control desire and anger.
Okay, see now, this is all supplemental to this verse today, that sarva chanabhisneha stata prapya subhasubham nabhinandanti nadvesti tasya prajna pratistita, which says, in the material world, in the one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. So, to be unaffected and unattached is not an easy thing. But we discussed early on, when there were very few people here, that the way to do that, the segue to becoming unaffected by attachment, fear, and anger is by kirtana, by Hari Kirtana, chanting regularly every day, and hopefully 16 good rounds minimum a day. Actually, you should be chanting all the time. See? And that way it purifies the mind of attachment, fear, and anger. Now you have to think carefully about this. See, this is what Lord Chaitanya was teaching. He said, Kirtana prabhave smarana haibe se kale bhajana nirjana sambhava. That is, always remembering Krishna can only occur by the power of kirtana. And only at that time is solitary bhajana possible. In other words, sitting in in Vrindavan and chanting. But we should never attempt such a thing. But we can always remember Krishna by regularly, every day, being regulated. See? And what did 23 say? 23 said that says, such Goswamis live strictly controlled lives and forego altogether the forces of the senses. Material desires, when unsatiated, generate anger. In other words, when you can't satisfy your material desires, you get angry. So people who have anger, what is it called? They can't control their anger. What is it called? It's called anger. Yeah. There's another word. Anyway, they don't have good anger management. Huh?
Mentally challenged.
No, that's another word. Huh? Oh, they have bad temper, yeah. So people who can't control their anger, it's because they have strong material desires that they can't satisfy. Now you know the cause of it. Right?
Is it always material desire?
Yes. Well, it's always a desire, let's put it like that. Right? And when, there are people who've been frustrated in their material desires for years. And they have this anger management problem, yeah. Did you say anger management problem? Yeah. Anger management problem. Right. And many people have an anger management problem. They easily get angry. That's because they have innate material desires that they can't satisfy for one reason or other. And then they end up having a short fuse, as they say. A fuse is this thing you light, and then when it burns out, it explodes a bomb, right? But if they have but usually you have to have a long fuse. The time, as soon as you light it, then you have to have time to run far away, so you don't get blown up yourself, right? But if a bomb has a short fuse, just like only that short, right? So as soon as you light it, you don't have enough time to run away. You die also. So when a person has a short fuse, that means for a little thing they get really angry, and they go overboard. Okay. So we must learn to have strictly controlled lives and forego the forces of the senses. So the senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, are pushing us, right? The tongue wants to eat more sweets and more sweets, and the eyes want to watch more nonsense and more nonsense, and this thing and that thing. See, and they're pushing us, and unless we can control them, and how do you control them? By association with good devotees and chanting, and having regulated devotional service, and having regulated, a regulated schedule. It's where you have a controlled life. Then, when you do the same thing every day, like clockwork, right? Waking up, bathing, chanting, Mangalarti, class, Tulsi Arati, this thing, that thing. Then you're able to control gradually the material desires. And then this process that we read, Ado Shraddha, Bhajana Kriya, and sadhu sangha, and then anartha nivritti, and then bhajana kriya, which is initiation, and then anartha nivritti, then nishta, then ruchi, then atashaktis, and then bhava, and then eventually prema. These are the nine steps to reach pure love of God. Okay, so let's come back to the second chapter, verse 57. Actually, we talked about 56 and 57. 56 is, one is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. So we studied more deeply this attachment, fear, and anger problem on 4th chapter, 10th verse, and then we went a little further, 5th chapter, 23rd verse. There are more verses we could read, because this is a big theme, but Vita Raga Baya Krodha. So Raga is attachment, Baya is fear, Krodha is anger. So one must be free, as it says here. Consequently, he is not at all angry even when his attempts are unsuccessful. Success or no success, a Krishna conscious person is always steady in his determination. That's the sign of a real Krishna conscious person. Whether it's success or not success, they continue in their regulated activities of devotional service. So, if you want to know who is an advanced devotee, it's the devotee that's regulated. For not just for a short period of time, but for their whole life. And they're always engaged in following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, and above all, chanting. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. That is a sign that they have understood Krishna consciousness. So, but one fixed in Krishna consciousness has neither attachment nor detachment, because his life is dedicated in the service of the Lord. Consequently, he is not at all angry even when his attempts are unsuccessful. Success or no success, a Krishna conscious person is always steady in his determination. So I got some good news. Today we received our permit to go forward with the Bellevue Temple. It took 5 years.
What does that mean? What does that do?
That means that now we can build the inside of the temple into a school and a temple and a commercial kitchen and open it up. It's going to take a little while still, but now it took us a long time to get to this point, to get the building permit to go forward. So that means, we made an estimate today that we might be able to open a school at least in September, if we make the right decisions and go forward.
So school like elementary school?
Yeah, it'll be, preschool, just like Synergy.
Synergy.
Yeah, it'll be a second school. And then the temple, and then we'll have a commercial kitchen, and by the end of 2020 we'll have a restaurant also.
It'll be bigger kitchen than ours right now.
What's
No,
that?
it's
What's
the
the
same
address?
size.
Oh,
In Belred Road?
Yeah, 124th and Belred Road. Yeah, so we will stop now. How can we wake up early if we don't stop? Right, Krishna?
Yeah.
Did you do your homework
I did.
for tomorrow?
I'm done with part of it.
So, but you didn't know what was
What
the
was the
homework, right?
homework you did
do. I
post
asked
it?
him.
Krishna.
How am I supposed to post it?
Okay. Sorry.
No, I'll tell you what the homework is. Homework is, so we've been studying the Big Bang, right? And how to prove that God exists, right? So the homework was to find out the origin of creation according to Srimad Bhagavatam. The materialists say everything started with a Big Bang.
And the Brahma Samhita.
Yeah, you can look in Brahma Samhita. Nice homework, isn't it?
Probably, is it okay? In my homework, I just coded some important.
Yeah, yeah.
So I found the 3.11.8. Yeah. Like one of the verses from there, it's like there's like some measurements of time, like lama and like all those. So then, is that how it got created? Like there was one measurement, and then it became another one and another one.
All right, I'll give you a big hint.
I think that's a chapter, right?
I'll give you a big hint here.
Maybe 3 or 4.
It's the Brahma Samhita, right?
It was Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, but I looked in chapter 3 or 4.
In what?
In chapter 3, chapter 3 or 4.
What did it say?
I can go.
1 second.
I'm listening to some lecture. I forgot the person was taking right now. It's like a few hours. Papa, when I saw name trouble, taking a lecture today.
मुझे ना खबर है cosmology
Cosmology. You're listening to Dr. Richard Thompson?
No, when Prabhuji came, no, he gave 3
Oh,
days
yeah,
seminar on Bhagavatam, on
Yeah.
cosmology based on Bhagavatam.
I could barely take it.
Okay, so beginning on verse number 8, it begins to talk about creation of the material world. 7 and 8. 7 and 8.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, every kid had a different topic, right? That's for
That
the
was
same
last
thing, right?
week.
That was last week.
What's that? What difference?
Like energy and
That was last week.
Somebody has to ask the question. You have to post it back. Somebody asked the homework.
stop the live feed.
Yeah, this is a little complicated to understand. But anyway, I gave you the hint. The
Yeah,
hint
that's
was everything starts by sound vibration.
Oh, okay.
That you'll see, that whole thing, sequence you'll see in the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Like, is there any specific chapters?
I don't think there are chapters.
Well, I mean, one second.
Krishna, you already started your homework?
Yeah.
Friday, right.
1 second.
Dates में